when you think about it, the threats to the tech world, like, I don't know about you, but when I think about it, I usually think about these big cyber attacks, right? Like the ones you hear about from, Russia or China or some kind of shadowy group of hackers.
Yeah, that's usually what makes the headlines, right?
Yeah, exactly. But like, what if the real dangers are a little more under the radar? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like something that's happening right under our noses, Like in the actions of just regular people here in the U.S., that's kind of the unsettling thing that we're going to look at today in this deep dive. You sent over some really interesting stuff, actually. News articles, executive summaries, that kind of thing. And our goal today, as always, is to break it all down, like pull out the key insights without totally overwhelming you, with too much information.
Yeah, information overload is definitely a thing these days. So today we're focusing on San Antonio, Texas. We're diving into the situation with Chris Hannifin and his company, DefendIT Services.
DefendIT Services.
We want to try and figure out, what are the risks here, and like what can we learn about, the bigger security picture from what we're seeing in these documents that you sent over.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right, so let's set the stage here. Chris Hannifin, former U.S. Air Force officer, pretty strong background in cybersecurity, looks like. And, over his career, he's been at some pretty big names, right? EY, SiloTech, RSM, even USAA.
Oh, wow, USAA.
Yeah, the big financial services company for veterans, right? So all places where he would have had access to like some really sensitive information and would have understood just how valuable that information is.
Yeah, definitely. Positions of trust for sure.
Oh, yeah, big time. And then it looks like kind of out of the blue, he starts this company, DefendIT Services, right in the middle of 2024.
Summer, yeah.
Yeah, midsummer. Yeah, so right away, a couple of big questions pop up. Like how exactly did this new company come about, and what's the story behind all this wealth he seems to have all of a sudden around the same time?
Yeah, and what's really interesting to me here is this connection between, the start of DefendIT Services and his previous job at North-South Consulting Group, NSCG.
NSCG, okay.
So Krista Stevens, she's the CEO of NSCG. She played a surprisingly big role in getting DefendIT Services off the ground.
Really?
Yeah. So public records, they show that she, not only co-founded the company with Hannifin, but she was also the first registrar agent when it was incorporated for the incorporated.
Okay, so hold on. His boss is helping him start a company that could end up being like a competitor, right?
Yeah, it definitely seems a little strange.
It seems a little more than strange to me, but okay.
Yeah, but the sources, they also kind of paint this picture of a lot of tension, a lot of internal conflict going on at NSCG at the time. Like former colleagues, they've described Hannifin's behavior as, quote, increasingly deranged, and they talk about these clashes with Stevens on like all sorts of stuff, how teams should be managed, which clients they should go after, that kind of thing.
So we're talking like more than just your typical, office disagreements.
Oh, yeah. And then to make it even more complicated, you start getting these rumors flying around inside NSCG.
About?
And these weren't just like, water cooler gossip. The allegations were a lot more serious.
Okay.
So people were saying that Hannifin was selling proprietary information.
Really?
Yeah. And not just to, competitors or whatever, but to what people called, quote, sketchy foreign brokers working on behalf of foreign adversaries.
Whoa.
Yeah, so right away you've got that very real possibility that sensitive client data is being compromised.
Okay, so let me get this straight. If Stevens is having all these problems with him, right? If there are these serious rumors going around about him selling secrets potentially to like hostile foreign entities, why would she then go and give him resources, give him support to launch his own company? Like it doesn't really add up.
It definitely doesn't seem logical, does it?
No, not at all. And then you add to that the fact that he was only at NSCG for like 8 months, pretty short time, before he leaves. DefendIT Services in tow,
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder what was really going on.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then it gets even weirder because right after that, Stevens cuts off all ties with him.
Yeah, completely. She removes herself as the registrar agent for DefendIT Services. No more contact, nothing.
And that's after like all that support she gave him at the beginning, right?
Exactly. So you got to wonder, what was their relationship really like? And like what happened, what event or what realization made her change her mind so drastically?
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of points back to this one big question that keeps coming up in the sources we're looking at, right? Is Defend IT Services a legitimate cybersecurity consultancy? Or is it, like one of the sources said, quote, simply operating as a front for Chris Hannifin to sell sensitive information?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And that's not just the way the company started. It's the money too, right? The sources are talking about all this weird spending by Hannifin right around when Defend IT Services gets going.
An odd spending spree, they call it, yeah.
Yeah, an on-spending spree. So we're talking about him buying a trailer, a boat, a house in San Antonio, all within a pretty short period of time. Like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, especially when you consider that he's, just starting a new business.
Exactly. That's the thing, right? Like most people who are starting a business, they're not throwing around that kind of cash.
Yeah.
And, in the counterintelligence world, they pay attention to that kind of thing. Someone suddenly living way beyond their means, especially someone who's had access to sensitive information like Hannifin.
Yeah, it definitely raises red flags.
It's not just the amount either. It's the types of things he's buying and the timing of it all,
So how does the timing make a difference?
Well, so suddenly buying a bunch of things that aren't easy to turn back into cash, like real estate or a boat, that could be a way to hide money, to get it out of the financial system where it's easier to track. It's actually something they see in other economic espionage cases.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not just the house and the boat either, right? The sources say that there were some other big purchases too, just fueling that suspicion that something illegal might be going on.
Yeah, and now we're getting new information that Hannifin and his wife, they opened up a cash-only business in San Antonio. And that's, another way to potentially launder money if you're trying to hide where it came from.
Right, right. It reminds me of that case in Norway, you remember? With the Russian spy?
Oh, yeah, the one who was posing as a researcher?
Yeah, yeah. They didn't catch him because of, spying directly. It was because he was spending way more than he should have been able to based on what he said he was making.
Interesting. So they look for spending habits that don't match up. That's like a sign that something might be off.
Exactly. And then there's what the sources are calling, quote, the mysterious Mexican connection.
The mysterious Mexican connection, yeah.
So right around the time he leaves NSCG and sets up DefendIT Services, Hannifin goes on a trip to Mexico with this former colleague of his, a guy named Rudy Reyes.
Rudy Reyes, okay.
And we don't know exactly why they went, but the timing of it, right when all this other stuff is going on, it's setting off some alarms.
Makes sense.
Yeah, the sources are saying it doesn't look like it was just a casual vacation or anything.
No. Too much was happening in Hannifin's professional life for it to just be a coincidence.
Right. So the sources have a couple of theories about this secret meeting in Mexico.
Okay, let's hear them.
All right, the first one is that Hannifin had something on Krista Stevens, some kind of dirt. They call it kompromat.
Kompromat?
Yeah, it's a Russian word, basically meaning like blackmail material, something you can use to pressure someone.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
So the idea is that maybe Hannifin and Reyes went to Mexico to figure out how to use this kompromat to their advantage.
Oh, interesting.
And that could explain why Stevens didn't just fire him, why she even helped him start his own company at first.
So he was basically holding this information over her head. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold move if it's true. All right, so that's theory number one. What about theory number two?
All right, theory number two. The sources think that maybe Hannifin took Reyes to Mexico to introduce him to some of his, quote, foreign contacts.
Oh, okay. So like to expand his network of buyers for sensitive information, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. That Hannifin was trying to, bring more people into the operation, and Reyes was someone he trusted, a former colleague.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that Stevens cuts ties with him right after this Mexico trip, like completely shuts him out.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
It really does make you think that something major went down during that trip.
Definitely. Like one of the sources said, quote, the abrupt end of their business relationship following Hannifin and Reyes' return from Mexico strongly indicates that there was no coming back from whatever transpired between Reyes and Hannifin in Mexico. So yeah, something big must have happened there.
Something that changed everything. Okay, so let's step back for a minute and think about the bigger picture here. We've got some some pretty serious national security concerns mixed up in all of this.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like there are people in the San Antonio tech community saying that Hannifin, quote, could potentially be compromised by a foreign state.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you look at his resume, his background, it makes sense that he would be a target, you know?
Totally. A former U.S. Air Force officer who's had all these high-level cybersecurity jobs, working on top-secret projects at companies that handle, super confidential government information. EY, SiloTech, RSM, even USIA, Intel.
Yeah, that's a lot of access to some really valuable stuff.
Oh, yeah. And countries like Russia and China, they're always looking for people like that, people they can exploit to get their hands on that information to further their own goals, their own military objectives,
Absolutely, absolutely. And what's the biggest risk to the U.S. in all of this?
Well, the sources say that it's all about strategic autonomy. Like the idea is that the U.S. is going to stay ahead of the game in tech, especially in these crucial areas like artificial intelligence, and that'll give the U.S. a big advantage on the world stage.
Okay, so if we're leading the way in AI, we have an edge over other countries.
Exactly. But if people like Hannifin are selling our secrets, our technology, our know-how, then it completely undermines that whole plan.
Yeah, it levels the playing field in a way that's not good for the U.S.
Right.
Yeah.
And this isn't a new worry either. The sources say that U.S. intelligence has been increasingly concerned about this kind of thing since the late 2000s. Foreign countries trying to get their hands on our data and our technology.
Okay, so this is a pattern that's been building for a while.
Yeah, and if these allegations about Hannifin are true, it means that the systems we have in place to protect national secrets, they're not working as well as they should be.
Yeah, a big crack in the system.
Yeah. And the consequences, like one of the sources said, they could be, quote, devastating. We even have a quote here from Ryan Young. He's with the FBI's intelligence branch. He says, quote, "No U.S. industry, large or small, is safe from economic espionage." And he goes on to say that no individual, no matter their background, no matter how trustworthy they seem, is immune to being corrupted. It's really a wake-up call.
Wow. That's a pretty strong statement.
It is. It is. It basically means that any company, any person could be a target for this kind of spying, economic espionage. They're after valuable business secrets, technological advantages, and the countries behind it, they're not afraid to use any means necessary to get what they want. And the impact, it can be huge, both for the economy and for national security. It's not just about, losing money or market share. It can really weaken a country's position in the world.
Wow. Are there any other examples of this kind of thing happening?
Yeah. Actually, the sources bring up this case in South Korea where some engineers were caught trying to sell semiconductor technology to China.
Semiconductor technology. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. And it shows that this is a real threat, And it often involves more than just one person, like in this case with Hannifin and potentially Reyes.
Right.
And something else that makes people suspicious about Hannifin is his job history, the way he's moved around so much.
Oh, you mean like how he only stayed at those other companies for a short time?
Yeah, exactly. Like EY, RSM, USAA.
Yeah.
He was only at each of those places for a short while. And these are all organizations that deal with classified contracts, sensitive information, So it makes you wonder if he was like intentionally hopping from job to job to get access to as much data as he could.
To build up like a library of information to sell, maybe?
Yeah. It's definitely a pattern that raises some eyebrows. So with all this going on, there are still a lot of unanswered questions, right? The sources bring up several.
Yeah, it feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
Right. So the big ones are, first of all, is DefendIT Services actually a real business?
Right. Or is it a front for something else?
Exactly. And then where did all this money come from that Hannifin's spending? What really happened during that trip to Mexico? Did Hannifin have some kind of dirt on Krista Stevens?
And was he compromised by a foreign power?
Yeah, that's a big one. And what specific information did he have access to? Could that information be in the wrong hands now? And what about Rudy Reyes? What was his role in all of this?
Lots of questions, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And those are the questions that the investigators, the counterintelligence people, they're going to be trying to answer.
And the answers to those questions are going to have a big impact on how this whole situation plays out.
Absolutely. We're talking about the possibility of huge leaks of government and corporate information, really damaging the reputation of Hannifin's former employers and their clients.
And potentially undermining national security.
Yeah, exactly. And the executive summaries, they say that it's almost certain that there are going to be some serious in-depth investigations going on into all of this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The FBI is probably all over this.
So if we bring this back to you, the listener, what can we learn from all of this? Well, the case of Chris Hannifin, it shows that the threat of insider threats and economic espionage, it's real, it's happening, and it's happening even in places you might not expect, not just in these big tech companies or government agencies.
Right. And it can be anyone. It can be someone you'd never suspect.
Exactly. And that means that we all need to be more aware of this kind of stuff. We need to be vigilant, even in sectors and situations that don't scream, national security threat.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to something for you to think about, for all of us to think about. The world of tech, it's so interconnected now, right? So what responsibility do each of us have? What responsibility do companies have to protect sensitive information? And what can we do to prevent stuff like this from happening in the future? How can we protect our economy, our national security? It's a big challenge, but it's a really important one.
It really is.
Yeah, it really is. All right, well, on that note, that's going to do it for this deep dive. Until next time.
Stay safe out there.